I am a doctor, but I am not attached at all, and I would readily drop all of that and become Tess, because I'm more interested in experiences and people's individual experiences rather than grouping a whole lot of data together and seeing people as numbers and words.
People actually feeling like they're stuck or that there's something more, and so what is this merry-go-round all about? I keep actually going around and around and can't seem to actually break through.
Nobody, is going to be your master. It's about self-mastery and mastering fear above all, because it's the fear that makes us do things that don't feel right, but we do them anyway.
When you don't have a box, then we have, unity. There is nothing to actually disagree about. It is actually for the collective. Maintain who it is that you are, and from that position you choose. Make a choice.
This is Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. I'm Cathy Dimarchos. Let's explore what it means to lead, live, and listen with intention.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. Today my guest is somebody who is just extraordinary. She's very humble and very quietly spoken, and I guess this actually shows us that there is a different way of leading to what we have traditionally been exposed to. So let me allow you to actually share a little bit of a brief indication as to the depth and breadth of who our next guest is. Tess Lawrie is actually a medical doctor. She's a research consultant and health sovereignty advocate. Her clinical and research expertise derived from both developed and developing countries includes preparing evidence-based guidelines for the actual World Health Organization, and that stemmed from 2012 to 2021. Dr. Lawrie is the CEO of the Evidence-Based Medicine Consultancy Limited. She's a director of EBMC Squared CIC. She's the founder of Bird International and ambassador for the World Council for Health and for Better Way movement. Tess actually believes that there is a better way for health and sovereignty and is dedicated to co-creating this. So pay attention. There is so much that you'll actually hear that Tess shares with us today. In addition to that, Tess is also the author of Science and Wisdom experiment called Game of Trust, the Lawrie Files, and that can actually be found on her website, which is www.lauriefiles.com. So please join me in welcoming Lawrie to this podcast. Lawrie, thank you for actually taking the time out on a Monday morning to actually be with us.
Thanks very much, Cathy. It's really great to be speaking with you, and I love the scope of your podcast. So I hope I can contribute to the conversations that you're having.
Oh, Lawrie, when our audience actually does get to hear this, there will be so many more questions that I know that they will actually want from you. So let's actually start with, I guess you do have an extraordinary lived experience. And I guess the theme of the podcast is really, raising consciousness and allowing people to have a different conversation with your actual, expertise, both in developing and developed countries, and especially with your research, through health. What is one thing that you can actually perhaps start us in this conversation that may bring greater awareness to people?
That we can all become great. So this is really, the hero's journey. I think if people can recognize that they're on a journey, that they aren't just who they are and that's it, that they're on a journey that started when they were born and ends someday in the future, and they have every single moment to explore changing and growing and learning, then life becomes really wonderful. I'd like to share a little bit about my background, Cathy, because you mentioned my professional experience in developing and developed countries, but in actual fact, I have a lived a life experience in those countries too. And my life has been turbulent, like many people, lots of fairly traumatic events. Some people glide through life not really feeling like they have any traumatic events, I believe. But I think most of us have a variety of traumatic incidents that start with, when we're children. And it can be, really just an adult saying something that hurts your feelings and not really being able to place it. And then, insecurities and lack of self-confidence develop out of that. But there can be also more serious sorts of things, abuse and neglect and so on.
Yeah.
And, that's not my story, but my story, well, having said that, there were harsh words said as a child that I didn't understand and didn't really trust adults very much. But what really traumatized me as an adult was the loss of my child. I lost my first child. And
I'm so sorry.
And I was a doctor and a mother, so I thought, well, how could this have happened to me? I was actually delivering babies. My area of expertise was obstetrics. I was delivering hundreds of babies every year, and I was actually a registrar when I lost my baby. So I was working, day and night I did 11 cesarean sections the week my baby was born. I mean, in one night, at the busiest hospital in South Africa. So I was very, very hurt and thrown back on myself, thinking, here I think I'm a good person, I'm doing my best, and this terrible things happen to me. Why me? And, and I blamed myself for many, many, I would say for decades. And then something else also happened. So, I grew up in South Africa. I was living in South Africa. I have ancestry going back a long way there. And we had a violent home invasion. I was married with 3 small children. And that was traumatic. My husband was very seriously wounded physically and the children all traumatized. And, so this was another. And so we actually relocated after that because we felt so fearful and, worried for the future of the children. So off we packed to the United Kingdom. And in actual fact, that relocation was quite shocking to me to see, in actual fact, the fear in this society too. We arrived and everyone was wearing high-vis vests. And I thought, well, look at all these policemen marching around. But it wasn't. It was the ordinary people wearing high-vis. The children were wearing high-vis, So a very fear-based society and very controlled. And I found it an insidious danger in the schools, the way the children are all brainwashed, and the sexual agenda for children, the sort of the early debuts into sex. And anyway, I just thought this is not safe. It's sort of out of the frying pan into the fires. And I had to work very, very hard. So I got into, I was the breadwinner, and I was having to really, get my research consultancy up and running. And, meanwhile, being a mother of 3 children who newly located to a new country. So we relocated in 2009. About 2017, I thought this world doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. Because here I am, what would be a good enough person. Here I am doing my best. Here I am a professional person. I'm earning a lot of money, enough money to support my family. And yet there's never enough money. And there's never enough time to spend with my children. And my children are being raised by this system that is brainwashing them so that they hardly even, know me. They're on their phones with gadgets all the time. And I have no influence. And I could feel that I was just being driven by money, and I was losing my connection with my children and my family. And anyway, and I figured it just didn't work. This world was full of pain and suffering. That was the bottom line. So I felt quite hopeless at that time. And I thought, well, maybe, in fact, I felt I had a lump in my breast. So I went off to the doctor and had a scan and everything. And I think I was slightly wishing that maybe, that would be it, because I hadn't figured out what life was about. And then COVID came along. I would say, well, this is some years later. Obviously, that was 2017. The breast was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. So I had to rethink what was life all about, And so I knew there was something deeply wrong. I was working for the World Health Organization as an external consultant. And I was aware that we weren't really helping anybody. So we were drawing up these policy documents. I don't have them behind me at the moment, but I was involved in writing clinical practice guidelines, preparing the evidence for the clinical practice guidelines. I would travel to Geneva and present this information and help guide panels to making recommendations. And we'd make all these recommendations about what should and shouldn't happen during pregnancy to pregnant women, during labor, etc. And nothing would change. The world seemed to get sicker and sicker. And so, I remember early 2020 saying to my colleague there, we don't seem to be making any difference. I'm getting slightly disillusioned. And then, bam, COVID came along. COVID was launched. And so then it all became clear to me, that there was something very, very
system-driven.
Yes, very, very systematically wrong. And there was a bigger picture, who was controlling everything. Now, when they launched COVID, of course, it was clear they didn't have the evidence for it. So I was there, I wasn't in Geneva, but I was thinking, well, where's the evidence for this? And then when they say we've got vaccines, I immediately knew this was it. It felt like, okay, so this is it. So now actually I'm going to have to do something because I'm in the know. I know what the WHO is about. I know how it functions in this very sort of fragmented way. So the left arm doesn't know what the right arm's hand is doing. And so this, and how they're pitching for these grants all the time. So it's, whoever pays that's the direction that gets taken. But I was just a little researcher. I had a little office at the top of a building in Bath, and my colleagues were all remote. And, most of the time I was just sitting in my computer looking at this data and writing things and then, traveling a few times a year. So I didn't think how I could possibly help. How could I be heard? But an opportunity came sort of December 2020 when I saw Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Paul Marek in the US saying that ivermectin was having a phenomenal positive effect on their patients and healing them from COVID symptoms. So I thought, well, this is somewhere I can jump in. And so I did a rapid systematic review on ivermectin. So that was my bag. I could, contribute in that way. And then when I tried to get the information out, I was just stonewalled silence. I sent it to the WHO, I sent it to my colleagues, I sent it to various health authorities, including the UK's, the FDA and the MHRA. And there was no response. So then I became an activist, a health advocate, a health sovereignty advocate, meaning people should have choice. And life became very interesting. So, when one gets active, speaking about consciousness, when you start waking up, if you don't do something with that information, if you're unable to step away from fear, then you get trapped in another sort of a cycle. But when you wake up, if you step away from fear, then life becomes very interesting indeed. And that was what I had to do because I was still a main breadwinner for my family. I was still needing to work and but in January 2021, I basically dropped everything. I outsourced my existing contracts, dropped everything and just said, I'm going to put myself to work here in this role to basically change the world because I realized that the system didn't work at all. There are these globalists who control the who are getting poisonous injections into everybody and setting up these, this digital framework that would enslave us. And if I didn't get active, then, and I had no idea that I would be any good, but I did think, well, if I get busy and other people get busy and we all get busy together, then who knows, what we can achieve.
You raised so many things, Tess, that actually are relatable to so many people, across the world, starting from, people actually feeling like they're stuck or that there's something more, and so, what is this merry-go-round all about? I keep actually going around and around and can't seem to actually break through. But I think what you've also actually highlighted is that what sits underneath that actual barrier to push through like you have is fear, especially when you're the bread earner and you then have to actually, almost justify, well, if I stop what I'm actually doing, then where do I go from here? And like you have shared you had a family. And so it wasn't just the trauma that you've actually experienced or the actual, change in environment. It was layer upon layer upon layer. And I think, if before we go any further, if whoever is actually listening to this actually just pauses for one moment and actually thinks, well, Tess actually did this, 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 and still said, yes, it is actually incumbent upon me to actually, share what I have just learnt, to push through the barriers despite everything, then anybody can do that. It comes down to choice and your actual conviction within who you are. Actually then, align with your values, your integrity to actually become a voice. And that one voice, of where you started, Tess, is now actually so much more. And so can we actually step into, I guess where you started was that conviction of it's me, recognizing that all of this just isn't okay, to beginning to actually uphold, that integrity and say, no, enough is enough. And, where you are now, there are so many tentacles that we can take this conversation with everything that you're involved, but maybe you can actually share the insights that you have of that sovereignty piece, because it's so important. Do you mind if we step into that?
Yeah. Well, once you know that there's something wrong, once you can actually distinguish what's right and what's wrong, if you don't act on that, you living a lie. Your spirit knows there's this dissonance that is going to disrupt your health. Not following what's right, not following your conscience in a very active way, can significantly impact your sense of well-being. And conversely, following your conscience and pursuing the truth and acting, taking actions is incredibly empowering. So, the fear-based thing I've come to realize speaking with people is mostly about money.
Yes.
And it's this money that controls the world. So people can go along so far, and then you see them sort of taking a slip road because suddenly it all comes down to money. But money it's very transient. We're in a phase where things are changing rapidly. And the powers that shouldn't be are going to try and pull that, what we, our lifeline, our money dependency. They're going to use that against us. And they're going to use it to keep us enslaved forever, with this shift over to digital currencies, the surveillance, the identifications and all that, verifications. It's going to be once in the system, and we are pretty much in the system already. You can't rent a house without all these digital checks and all this stuff. If we don't actually get out of that system, we will be enslaved, and our children will be completely enslaved if we do not stand up for them and take these steps. So sovereignty is actually, another word for sovereignty is self-governance, self-control, self-mastery. Nobody, is going to be your master. It's about self-mastery and mastering fear above all, because it's the fear that makes us do things that don't feel right, but we do them anyway. There's that funny little turn of phrase, I ought to. I feel I ought to do this. Well, what makes you feel you ought to do that? So we need to start questioning when we say I should, or I must, or I ought to. We need to say, well, what is the driving force behind that? Is it your conscience, Or is it money or what people will think or some other thing that's external to the situation? And, the stepping away from fear, it is a complicated thing because some people, can go back to those traumas. So that's why I mentioned trauma in the beginning, because one's fear of being without money can tap into, the early traumas where you've been neglected or abandoned or made to think that money is the be all and end all, or, that happiness comes with money. I think we all know that happiness is completely independent of money. If anything, money just makes you so unhappy. If you think about those couples getting divorced and the misery they have and the acrimony over who gets what and what, all of that stuff, it brings untold misery and suffering. But I know that it's difficult for people to comprehend how we do without money or how we do without substantial money and all the insurances and things. And this is part of that stepping away from fear into trust.
Yes.
And I encourage everybody to just look at the bills that they pay and how many of those are fear-based. Insurances, life insurances, pensions, all sorts of security things, and council taxes too. Everybody's paying tax. Well, you can't do without paying taxes. You can't do without paying your council tax for your refuse removal. Does it really cost hundreds of pounds every month or hundreds of dollars? Should it be is that the price? Where is all that money going? Now, it turns out the money is going to pay for wars and things and vaccinations and vaccination centers. So can you in clear conscience be paying these things, paying council tax? I'm just saying, when you know what's wrong, you have to make a plan as to how you're going to address it and put your spirit at ease and in comfort. Otherwise, there's this cognitive dissonance that something deep down. Your heart's talking to you, but your mind's overriding it and saying, but I can't do this because of that. So we have to find ways that we can ease ourselves out of a corrupt system and into the world that we want, that we can imagine.
I think, so much of what you have shared is almost innate. It actually happens through society. It happens through our educational system from a very young age. And, at that age, we don't necessarily have the ability to think critically. And so it's just learnt behavior. It's, it's rote learning, just, our times table is rote. So if I was to ask you, Tess, I know that you're involved with, a few different organizations, frameworks that actually give us agency, that give us that opportunity to ask the question of what else is possible. But if I can start before I go down that path with, how do we actually first begin to actually evolve the younger person's mind, given that most of the time what they're actually taught through the education system is a very narrative one. What else can parents do? What else can we actually do as a society to perhaps actually, allow a young person to think differently?
We need to bring back kindness and unconditional love. Children are raised in a very conditional environment. You will do this or that. And the parents push the mainstream framework on their children. So they're going to university and you have to get these grades and you have to. The most amazing young people that I have met have not gone to university or are not in. The most well-rounded, balanced children are not at school, at senior school. The ones that I've met who are working on farms or have chosen to step away from school and have taken some sort of apprenticeship, some practice, because they didn't feel quite into the whole narrow offering that you get at senior school. In the UK, and I don't know if it's like this elsewhere, in your A-level year, you do the same subjects for 2 years. You go, it's so boring. I mean, when I was at school, we had a whole range, we did history, science, English. It was still a prison, but we had more of a breadth of topics. But brainwashing, but now they have the same, and they have to learn off rote how to answer these questions. So it's absolutely mind-numbing. And so, the young people who are out in nature doing things because they're passionate about it, enjoying learning practical skills, they are so much more well-balanced than these children that are told by their parents, look, just finish school and then we'll, as long as you get into university, we'll find something. And then they're just trapped again in another mind-numbing system. So we need to stop imposing these societal government recommendations on our children and really tap into what do they really love doing? What brings them joy and pleasure? Is it dancing? Yeah. Well, let's foster dancing. Let's not think about what they need, how they're going to make money, and what they should do is have a backup plan in case whatever in the future, some terrible thing happens in the future. And if we can identify and nurture who our children are, what really makes them happy, then we can start to guide them in the best possible way.
I love that you've shared that. One of the things that I actually do, and this is with adults, because what you shared right at the beginning, around people not knowing who they are and just continuously being in that loop, is the very thing that you're talking about with young children. We're actually guiding them into a tunnel that is based on what we fear they will miss out on if they don't go to university. But what I actually ask people now in their 50s and, as adults, where they say there's got to be more, is who are you? Not with a title, not what you do, who are you? And actually tell me what you love doing. What is it that you actually, if I say to you, you've accomplished that last thing that you wanted when you take that last breath, what is it that you want to do? Who is it that you are? People look at me like, I've never thought about that. And yet that's what they're yearning. So that's the very thing that you're actually talking about. And Tess, you also actually said kindness, unconditional love and kindness. And that is one thing that has actually been lost in society. Now, I know that a lot of people are actually thinking it's all right for you, Tess, because you have your degree. It's all right for you, Cathy, because, you have yours. And so we're actually asking people to do the very opposite of what we've done. So how can we actually come to terms with that? Because there's incongruency. We have followed a path, Tess, but we're asking people to consider the exact opposite, right?
But that's a wonderful question, Cathy, because I was sent so far off my soul path. I was sent so far off my entire, I went into medicine as a 6-year degree, and then I had to pay the money back because I had a bursary and a loan or whatever that tapped me and tied me down for another 6 years. And then I did a PhD, and that was another. And, I went so far off the path because I'm a creative person. Like most people, we're creative. We have imagination. And, I used to daydream like the best. And suddenly I was trapped in this thing that got me into numbers and words, and I had to write all these documents and things. And I felt not myself. So it's taken me a long time. I'm now 58, It's taken me decades to find myself, and I encourage people not to go so far off the path that I did, because I'm definitely not attached to my degree. I know it helps people when they see Dr. Tess Lawrie. It helps in my relatability, because a lot of what I'm doing with the World Council for Health is to reach people and reassure them that there are alternative approaches to health. And for many people, seeing that I am a doctor and that I do have research experience, etc., is reassuring to them. But I am not attached at all, and I would readily drop all of that and become Tess, because I'm never going back to doing evidence-based medicine the way it was done before. I'm more interested in experiences and people's individual experiences rather than grouping a whole lot of data together and seeing people as numbers and words. And I'm never going back to clinical work in hospitals and things. I've, you could say, burnt all those bridges, some would say. But for me, it's totally given me a new lease on life. And I now speak from a much more authentic place. And it's just, this is who I am. And I know there's a better way. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to do my best through and trust that this new journey is, well, it's my way, it's my path. And I don't know, what tomorrow will bring. I just live in the present. Today's a great day and I appreciate things. I'm grateful for, the lovely tree giving me some shade, and I'm grateful for the little rose bush that's, producing some roses today, the lovely scents in the garden and the birds. And I'm grateful for the wonderful people I work with around the world and the connections that, the new family that has come out of this really dark time, this new amazing sovereign self-governing family that's come out, and that we're all connected. And so, I feel very optimistic that we will all find our way, and create this better world that we all need.
So you touched on a couple of things, Tess. One is that you don't want others to actually, spend decades going down a particular path and then realizing that that narrative doesn't actually resonate. It's almost like climbing up a ladder because you go, I've got to get there. And then realizing you're on the wrong ladder, right? So you mentioned, you have a new community. Can we touch on that? The better way, I think is something that you shared with me, in an earlier conversation that gives people choice. And it's not something that perhaps they've actually come across. So I would love to actually have you share a little bit of that, if that's okay.
Yes. Well, in 2021, I set up World Council for Health along with other people and lawyers and doctors who were feeling the same as I was, that we needed a new guidance. And the slogan that we have for the World Council for Health is "There's a Better Way." And in 2022, we held the first Better Way conference. And this was very solutions focused. We got many, many speakers from around the world to come and have these panel conversations about how we can make a better world, and, science, law, health, integrative health, and the environment, everything. We covered everything, the media. And after that, we thought, well, there were such great ideas that came out of that. Let's put it into a document. Anyway, we produced this document. And it was far too long. We thought, no one's going to read this document. Can we distill it down further? So we distilled it down to 7 points. And these became 7 principles, which we've now made 8. But they are that we act in honor and do no harm. Every one of us, not just the doctors, we all have to act in honor and do no harm. That we have free will and are responsible for our choices. That we're part of nature. And nature needs to be nurtured by us as it nurtures us. That spirituality is integral to our well-being. We value life with meaning and purpose. This is how we learn and grow. Yes. We thrive together. We need our connections with others. We don't thrive, all these elderly folk, our elders are put into nursing homes and isolation, these, little pods and flats and live on their own. We don't thrive that way. We thrive together.
Yes.
And we value different perspectives, and having different perspectives, each of us carries, there's no way you can be inside someone else's head and have their perspective. We're all totally unique individuals. So we need to be respectful and have respectful discussions and realize that we learn and grow through sharing our perspectives and wisdom. Yeah. It doesn't mean you have to agree with somebody. You can still maintain your own perspective whilst hearing others. And then we use technology with discernment, because there is this push to use this artificial technology to create new human, sort of cyborg race, you could say, of humans. And so technology needs to be used very discerningly. And so those are the 7 principles. And the 8th principle was that we do not tolerate the violation of our inalienable rights and freedoms. and we do not tolerate profit, power, and influence coming before the well-being of people and the earth. Now we have incorporated that foundational statement into an eighth principle, and we just say we stand up for our rights and freedoms. So these principles we actually had translated into many languages, 30 languages, and I would say it's actually the main product of World Council for Health, because World Council for Health is a messaging organization. We're not saying we've just written this protocol and this is for you, and this is what we think you should do for diabetes or recommend. We're not doing that. We're a messaging organization. So we have all these partner organizations who are all doing great work. They're all the experts on various things, be it homeopathy or functional medicine or 5G and EMF, environmental issues, wind turbines, etc. So they're all the experts, and we can message for them, for our partners. So this ethos is what we are sharing to unite the people of the world around the common goal, which is to create a better world. And it seems to work very well because it transcends the national, there's all these barriers. There's national, cultural, there's religious barriers, all of these barriers. And this really speaks to the individual. So we're not saying we're going to create a better world by imposing these principles on everybody. We're saying, do these principles resonate with you? Can you use them in your life just to sort of reshape how you feel about yourself and your interactions and where you're going? And if you like them, use them. And as an organization, World Council for Health it's a free franchise. So we're decentralizing, and we offer our councils to the two brands. We offer them the World Council for Health brand, which is the apple with a hand heart. And we offer them the Better Way brand, which is a bird in a tree, because like a bird in a tree, we must be free.
Yes.
So there are these two. The one speaks more strongly to health, and the other speaks more strongly to sovereignty and self-governance and self-mastery. And particularly with the bird in the tree, we are promoting a better way, and a better way movement, you could call it, because they've other sorts of movements like MAHA, which is Make America Healthy Again, which feels like a very top-down corporate approach. The Better Way movement is really about all the individuals that are already all doing great things around the world in their own lives, in their families, in their communities. They're growing food, they're bartering their skills, they're starting all these amazing new initiatives, new little health centers, and offering new types of healing modalities. So there's all of these great initiatives going on that all are Better Way. They all fall into. So this logo is a free franchise, really. And whilst World Council for Health, we have a little agreement with things, I do see a time when people will just be using the Better Way logo on their caps and tops and businesses, saying, I'm aligned with those principles, and I'm going to use this logo on my products and things. And so I do think there's a way we can show international cohesion and unity whilst maintaining our individuality with just a simple ethos like ours.
I love that. In many ways, what you're saying is, let's not actually put anything in a box. When you don't have a box, then we have, unity. There is nothing to actually disagree about. It is actually for the collective. Maintain who it is that you are, and from that position you choose. Make a choice. Here are some options. I love that. Now, I know you shared an image or a slide, earlier. Do you mind if I actually ask you to pop that up? Because I think it's a really good visual for people to actually just understand in a snapshot of what you've just shared. Is that okay?
Absolutely. There you go. Has that popped up now?
Yes, it has. Thank you.
So I can just read you through this graphic. So It says, are you ready for a better way? Like the bird in the tree, we must be free. That was my touch because I'm a great fan of Bob Marley. His music was so profound to me as a young person. But We act in honor and do no harm. We use technology with discernment. We value life with meaning and purpose, and we're spiritual. We're sovereign and we have free will. We thrive together. We're part of nature. We value different perspectives, and we stand up for our rights and freedoms.
Yeah. See, you know what I love about this? It can actually speak to any age group, any cultural background. There genuinely is no, barrier from what
Yes.
I can actually see.
Yeah, and Cathy, this is the hand heart. So I just wanted to show you, it's a piece of felt and it's got some jewelry elastic. They're super easy to make. You can make 20 out of an A4 sheet and of felt, and it costs like $1 or something for 20 of these. So there's great fun, a great activity for children, and it's a great activity for, I love making them. I make them while I'm in the evening, just resting my eyes, doing something practical. But it's a universal symbol of I love myself. I take responsibility for myself. And I say no. In Brazil, we've got groups of parents using this to say no. I do not consent to COVID vaccines for my child. And so it's a very powerful symbol. It transcends the language, all sorts of barriers. Everybody knows this symbol. But on the hand, it's very, and there's the hand chakra as well.
Yeah.
It's very, the heart chakra, it's a very powerful, simple symbol. And if we all use it, you can use it in the car, when you take a wrong turn or someone kindly lets you in and you say thank you, or, there's lots of ways you can diffuse road rage with it. But
absolutely.
I have a picture I can show you, just to when you see it in a group, how
how powerful
wonderful
it is.
Let me just find the.
While you do that, do you know the one thing that you said, Tess, as you actually shared, your hand actually going up? The message was, I love myself. And do you know what traditionally happens? We're actually told to say, I love you. We miss that part about loving ourselves, right?
Well, I think it's really important that people just reflect now. Can you say, I love myself?
Mm.
And when you get to that, when you can get to that place, if you can love yourself unconditionally with all the, the warts and traumas and all of that, and get through it and say, I actually love myself. I've done okay. I got here, and who knows where I'll be next year or the year after, or, in 30 years' time. It's a wonderful place to be and allows you to be your authentic self. So that's really what you can work on. And you can work on it just starting by making yourself a little hand heart and trying it out. Certainly for children, I think it could be a very powerful tool, just what we were speaking about earlier, Cathy. How do parents, what can they do for their children through kindness and unconditional love? Teach them to love themselves and that they are wonderful.
Do you know, I actually had a conscious leaders retreat not very long ago. And one of the things that I did was actually ask them, now these are professional men and women, to actually stand in front of the mirror and just take a moment to look at themselves, followed by telling themselves, I love you. And it is challenging because we're not actually shown how to do that. We're not told to do that. There's almost this, oh, that's actually rather arrogant of you or selfish of you to love yourself, right? How on earth can we actually show love genuinely if we don't actually do it for ourselves? It's like actually pouring, water out of an empty cup. Well, not much is going to come out, right?
Mm. Mm.
So I love that you've shared that, and I love the image that you actually showed, of everybody actually with that hand up earlier. So thank you for that. Now, Tess, there's so much that we can actually share, but if I was to say to you, if there's one more thing that, you would actually want the listeners, to actually take away, what would that be?
It would be that we're at a time of great change. there's, I think those who are aware of astrology and ancient texts know that we're at a time of great change, and we do have a choice. And there's got to be some reason why you're here at this time. You could have been born 200 years ago or 500 years, but you're here now. So you have a choice, and you have a choice between a better way or some ghastly transhuman world. How do we move forward? It's an absolute trust. Yeah. If you think of this as some massive cosmic game that's been going on for millennia, the name of this game starting now is trust. And it's not trust in authorities. Yeah. It's not trust in some external figure. It's trust in yourself. It's trust in your own heart. So that the work that needs to be done is tuning into your own heart and really following your intuition and trusting that intuition manifests good always.
I love that you share that, because first of all, you're actually coming from an academic background. And so that has traditionally been, a voice of authority. But what you have actually encapsulated now is, the pure essence of spirituality and sovereignty, which is to be relying on yourself, because at the end of the day, we all know. We have an inner knowing. But, we've been told that go into your brain rather than into your heart to actually come to an outcome. And you have just now reaffirmed, the thing that I say is, no, your heart knows, your intuition is actually right. And so trust that, be guided by that. And I think, if I was to say to you, if you begin to actually notice those nudges, it becomes more frequent and you actually begin to rely on it. But you've got to start, right?
Yes. And if I could just say, the word authority really needs to be looked at. If ever you find yourself thinking, well, the authorities say this. We started out speaking about the hero's journey, and how it's up to us to make our lives interesting and exciting and full of learning and growth and make ourselves great one day. But then the word authority needs to be dropped, because in order to be the hero of your journey, you need to be the author of your journey, and authority, you need to be the authority in your life and the one that you listen to.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's so powerful. And it is something that, everybody that's listening, no matter where they are, no matter how old they are, no matter what cultural background, actually giving a moment to pause to think about what you have just, shared with us is so powerful. It's almost like that's the turning point that you're actually asking people, to consider. So thank you. That is just beautiful. Now, is there anything else that you wanted to actually share before we wrap up? I think we need to have you back again.
Well, I'd just like people to subscribe to worldcouncilforhealth.org and to subscribe to our Substack. We've got a World Council for Health Substack that puts out really excellent health and sovereignty messages, information. And also, I'd like you to subscribe to my personal Substack, which is A Better Way with Dr. Tess Lawrie. I am increasingly censored. I have had a lot of difficulty getting the word out. And I am also, we are very short-staffed. So if you could be our messengers by sharing our messages, be they our Substacks, our LinkedIn posts, Telegram, etc. If you could subscribe to our media, that would be a great help. We're on Facebook as well. The World Council for Health is on Facebook. And so wherever you see our messages, if you could help amplify them, you'd be helping to amplify a better way and get us to a better world quicker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tess. And those details will actually be shared once this podcast goes live across, all of the platforms. So if you haven't caught it, don't panic. Have a look down but the details will be there. Tess, I'm very grateful for your time, for your wisdom, for your, absolute genuineness. That authenticity piece is so important. And, the way that you have actually shared that insight, with all of us listening today, I think is invaluable. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Cathy, for your time. And I'll just show my hand hard.
Yes, I wish I had known and I would have done that too. Thank you, Tess.
This was Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. Stay awake, lead with heart, be bold enough to listen deeply. I'm Cathy Dimarchos. Until next time, be the impact.